Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. Tonight I am going to talk about my top books of the decade. It seems so crazy to say that. It also makes me feel old that, like, I don't know, decades pass and you barely notice. But Gavin Hetherington, which I'll link his channel below, did this video and I really enjoyed it, and I was like, what a cool idea. And honestly, I had no idea like when some of these books were published, because it's not books that I've read, like my favorite book of 2010. It's my favorite book that was published in 2010. So I went through lists on Goodreads and went through my read list to come up with my list. Honestly, some of these, most of them I don't actually have copies of, but most of these I don't have copies of. I do a lot of reading from the library or a lot of audiobooks. I love audiobooks. So a lot of these I've done initially from audiobooks. So I don't have all of them. But coming up in 2010 was Anna and the French Kiss. I know that this is uber cheesy and just ooey gooey, but I loved it. I read it in the summer and it was just like such a perfect summer read. Boarding schools or anything of the like, I love. It's one of my favorite locations in books. So I actually enjoyed all three in this series. Really loved them. I think they're just super sweet and super charming and such an easy read. Like, you don't have to think about it. And when I'm having a bad week, I can go back to these and just feel cozy. And so this was definitely one of my favorites. This was definitely one of my favorites, and it is my top favorite of 2010. And honestly, so my top favorite of 2011, I should have a copy of. I should, because I have read it multiple times. I have listened to it at least 3 times on the audiobook, but I have to tell you, like, the audiobook is amazing. And my 2011 pick is Ready Player One. It is read by Will Wheaton for the audiobook, so it is a must. Like, you need to read it or listen to it. It is so good. And if you've only seen the movie, like, the book is completely different. I wish that the movie could have been more like the book, but I know, like, the whole concept is just so big that I knew going into the movie it would be different, but I was surprised by how different it really was. For 2012, my book is Throne of Glass. I think I've read some fantasy. I mean, like, Harry Potter, I would consider, you know, magical fantasy. But Throne of Glass was, like, really my forte into that real fantasy world building. And then I really found my love. I love, like, I love the challenge, like, of them working all to be the best. I'm trying to think of assassin. I love, like, the assassin challenge with them trying to be the best and win. And I've heard that Nevernight is like that, so I really do need to get into that series too. But Throne of Glass I love. I've loved the first few books. I've not finished the series, so that's definitely a goal for me. But definitely loved Throne of Glass. 2013 is maybe kind of a surprise, but The Coldest Girl in Cold Town. I love this book. Like, I've listened to the audio a few times. I've read the physical copy a few times. I don't know. Ooh. I don't know what makes me love it so much, but I do. I love the concept of the darkness in the book and her falling in love with the vampire and feeling like an outsider. And the whole, like, people, like, wanting to go live in the vampire area. The concept is crazy to me. I do think it had its heyday when it was released, so I do think people know about it. But I definitely don't hear it talked about when people are talking about Holly Black's books. And that was definitely one of my favorites. 2014 was I'll Give You the Sun. And honestly, I'm writing it down and I'm saying, like, that's my favorite, but I don't remember a ton of it. It was like twins, brother and sister, and really learning who they were. And I remember the feelings it gave me. And So I really want, my goal in 2020 to reread these and really get the feels and the original reasons that I loved them. I love that I remember the feels from it, but not necessarily the story. So I'm hoping that those feels come in again. All the Bright Places is the same thing. Like, I don't really remember the storyline, which we could pull it up and see, but I remember the feels from it. I remember like being so attached to the artwork on the cover that I was like posting it on Instagram. So it's funny to add this to my list and not really have an idea for you, but both of those last two are contemporary YAs. Loved them. Definitely going to reread them so that I can give you a better synopsis. The 2016 favorite was Stalking Jack the Ripper. I love historical fiction, and coming at it from a perspective of a woman who wants to delve into forensic science and being an outsider because of the time period she's in and what women are, the standards of women. I loved that. I loved the love to hate, even though it wasn't horrible love to hate, but like that her and Thomas had, and just the creepy feels. It was so good. So I really enjoyed that series a lot. So that was a fun one. That was one I actually read in 2019, but it was very much loved it. The last four actually I read this year, but it's the year that they're published that we're focusing on. For 27, it was Eliza and Her Monsters. Eliza is this girl that's very much introverted. She struggles with her self-identity, with some depression, and she creates this online comic with these amazing characters that people fall in love with. Like, she's a huge following and people don't know it's her creating it. And so she's kind of dealing with that life and her online friends who are super important to her. And I think those of us who have a lot of online friends, the friends that we maybe have never met but like are super important to us, like totally get that. But a generation above us, like our parents, maybe don't get that. And Eliza certainly didn't. And it was just learning how to understand each other. And then of course there was this wonderful romance in there that was so realistic, and he loved her characters, but she didn't want to tell him who she was, and by the time that they'd really fallen in love, it was too late. And what do you do? So good. Her parents, I just love the progression of her parents understanding her understanding her siblings, and just really growing as a character. So I really enjoyed Eliza. And the next 2018 was Where the Crawdads Sing. This book was magic. I listened to the audio, and it was one of those books that I'm listening to constantly. So I'm listening it to the drive to work, at work, when I'm cooking dinner, when I'm sitting in the bathtub, when I'm laying down for bed, I'm listening to this book because I love it. I loved the thought of her growing up essentially alone, which that blows my mind because I know it even happens nowadays, that there's like kids that have to deal with such adult things, and her growing up in like the bayou by herself and just not really knowing social norms, and then falling in love but being treated badly. And I don't want to ruin it because it's so good, but like the progression of her growing older, and then some really rough stuff happens, and there's like courtroom hearings and everything, and then the ending of the book, it was so good. Like it was magical to listen to. You felt like you were there. The writing was amazing. So that definitely was a favorite. And the favorite for 2019, which I'm going to do a 2019 favorites video, so you're going to see it twice, but was A Starless Sea. I actually finished this today. It was so good. It was magic all the way through. You kept like wanting more. It drew you in from like the first page, and then there's so many stories woven in here, like, because it goes back between our main characters and then like stories from books and weaved in and out. And it was just magic. Like, I wanted to be there, even though some of the places were a little sketchy. I've honestly, like, the naked cover on this is amazing. And I've honestly, like, thought about getting this tattooed on my back, because this book was magic, and it was everything that you'd want. I do know that I can't recommend it to everyone. I do know that it's a lot for people who don't like fantasy or magical realism. I know that it takes time and effort to read it. You have to pay attention, and it weaves so amazingly through. I was just so blown away by this book. I definitely want to read it again and, like, annotate, because there's so many amazing quotes and sections that linked back and forth within the book and the story. Loved it. I love the characters, the character development. Our main character, Zachary, is in school for game design, so I loved that, because it kind of brought in those sections of how to create a game. And then his friend Kat too was in the same degree as him. He also was super literary and loved books. So I just, like, the characters themselves were so well written. I think Aaron Morgenstern has only done The Night Circus in this, and I can't imagine the time and effort that this took. It is a piece of art. I'm so blown away by all of the work that she put into this. I definitely know it's not for everyone, but for me, I felt like I was falling into a magical world the second I started reading it. So those are my top books the last decade. So those are my top books for the last decade. I would love to know what your top books are. So if you posted a video, please link it below. If you wanted to share some thoughts with me, I'm sure that my list is far different from yours, because that's the joy of being a reader, is we all have our own tastes. So please share. I'd love it if you like this video and subscribe, and I will talk to you again. Bye, friends.